Hello and welcome to What the Luxe with me, Fred Moore.
And me, Anand Sharma.
Together we lead Matter of Form, a design consultancy specialising in brand, digital experience and content. And this is a podcast that calls time on tired ideas of luxury.
Alongside industry luminaries and thought leaders, we explore what truly defines category-leading products and services.
Today on the show, we have an unusual and important story about the olive oil industry. Unusual because the story is about turning a commodity into a community. Important because this is symbolic and reflective of so many products we perhaps unmindfully consume or enjoy in our homes and daily life. The founders of Citizens of Soil saw an industry fraught with issues, including a dangerous lack of transparency and anonymized mass production, overly commoditized, with independent farmers not making enough money, and then oil changing hands countless times before reaching your table. Citizens of Soil are breaking that chain, allowing us to taste something we never would have had the chance to before, whilst improving farming techniques to preserve biodiversity and soil quality, championing female farmers and giving a fairer price at source. I'd like to welcome to the show Sarah Vachon, founder and CEO. Welcome, Sarah, to the podcast.
Thank you. I mean, you've said it all. So I'm like, what else is there to say?
That's it. Yeah. Thank you and good night.
Bye.
No, it's really great you're on today. I think this is, it's a really interesting topic and obviously unusual one for us on this podcast because we're a luxury podcast. Do you consider olive oil, first of all, before I ask anything about yourself or the company, olive oil a luxury product?
So I don't, but I can imagine a lot of people do nowadays because of the increase in price. We are often told that olive oil now is a luxury, as in it's inaccessible to a lot of people who could have afforded it in the past because of shortages and price increases. I don't think regular, your everyday extra virgin olive oil should be a luxury. I think it's a really important household staple that's been with us since, antiquity. But I do think that there are, just like wine, beautiful variations and profiles in different, unique and interesting olive oils that are created in a way that should be treated like a luxury because of all the process that goes into it.
Yeah, and I think I'd love to come back to some of the health benefits and other olive oil. But first of all, did you always dream of entering the olive oil industry? How did you get into this world?
I don't even think I thought about it that way. I didn't even know that there was, other than just the trading of olive oil, I didn't realize the whole part that you can really geek out on it like you can wine or coffee. I definitely always had an obsession and a passion for the Mediterranean. So I moved from Texas to Europe to live in the Mediterranean. I lived in Spain and I always loved just the way of life and the food and, the sunshine and the whole culture around it. And so some people who've known me for a while now think that I've created a business to suit the lifestyle that I wanted, which is fair enough. I certainly didn't think of it as a career, although I have spent a lot of my career working in food and drink. So it kind of aligned with, beautiful, delicious things on your table.
Yeah. So the obvious question, what's the founding story of Citizens of Soil? How did it come to be here?
Yeah. So, it wasn't wanting to go into extra virgin olive oil specifically. It was we have really good family friends who are Greek. They happen to be Greek from the island of Crete. And we were visiting them. We are such close family friends. My husband converted to Greek Orthodox to become a part of this family. We are the godparents of their son. It is that close of a relationship. So it's not just friends you might holiday and visit. We're going back to Greek Easter this year to spend it with them, which is a huge thing in Greek culture. So yeah, very close family friends who were small batch producers and farmers. They made wine, they made raki, they made olives. And every year we were bringing it back to our friends and family in the UK and in the US after Christmas, which is right when the harvest is. And everyone from, of course, friends and family to bartenders and chefs and people in the food space that my husband and I were working in were like, this is amazing. And we're like, yeah, why does it taste better than any other olive oil we find on the shelf?
A stupid question. It genuinely did and does taste different to
it did. Well, yes.
That bottle of extra virgin olive oil in Sainsbury's shelf.
It did. This was the what people informed us about whenever they tried it. They were like, gosh, it's so good. And we're like, yeah, why is that? Knowing nothing about extra virgin olive oil, except for that we liked it. I grew up in a household where we exclusively used extra virgin olive oil. My grandfather told me to only cook. So I already kind of had a background of using it, but I didn't know what it was supposed to taste like or what was good or what was bad. So we realized this with our friends. At the same time, I was working in sustainability for a company called Provenance.org, who was really pioneering end-to-end traceability using tech, but diving into supply chains around coffee, tea, other commodities. We did a big project with tomatoes in Italy, and I was seeing all these issues in commodity supply chains, and I was like, this is, I think, what's happening in olive oil. Like, our friends aren't making any, they have set market prices, commodity rates that are set. It doesn't matter the quality that they make, the fact that they're harvesting, their groves look beautiful, their olives look better than their neighbors. They're, putting all this much more attention into the care of the
It
olives.
literally gets mushed into a
And
central
getting
pool.
the same price. Yeah, getting blended with all these other, this neighbor, it's all going into the same pot.
To a cooperative or
Yeah.
typically.
Exactly. And they're not reaping the benefits of any extra care they put into that they're doing really because they want good olive oil and they're looking after their farms. There is a price difference between organic and non-organic, but that's really where it kind of ended. So I saw these similarities with other commodity supply chains, things like labor, things like regenerative agriculture, which I was starting to learn more about and thinking, God, this feels like it could solve so many of the problems on the Grove. And our friends are doing it. They've stopped tilling. They're using ground cover. They have these biodiverse groves. They're not spraying, chemicals, but they're not certified organic. Like,
Why were they doing that?
For their own consumption of their oil, because they were actually, even though the oil eventually got blended, they were milling it just theirs, consuming just theirs, having a pride of what they were making, even though the bulk of it was being sold on to be blended. But there was a part that was for them, and they didn't want chemicals in their food, and they wanted, they recognized some of the challenges that have started to reshape the Mediterranean with climate. And so, preserving water through ground cover is one way. There was aspects that they were doing. And I thought, from what I had seen in other supply chains, of how you can reward people who are stewards of the land to look after the land better and incentivize better quality at the same time. This model of, if I pay you more, will you do better agricultural practices? Will you make the oil, take these steps to make sure the oil is a better quality? Then I can sell it for more, and we can create this virtuous circle of reinvesting in you and also having a better end product. And that became the shape of the business. I knew nothing about olive oil, so soon after I started to get educated on it really quickly, because I knew enough from wine, because I had done some wine courses, to know there's defects. I'm sure, someone else, some expert can taste this and tell me it's bad. And I wanted to be that expert to find out before someone else told me that my oil was really bad.
Does this mean you became an olive oil sommelier of sorts?
Did. Yes, I did. I went on to actually do a training. I went to a school in Spain to get my certification to become like a expert taster, a sommelier.
So there are schools that exist in Spain for this precise purpose.
There's a fantastic school that started in Italy. There's a fantastic one in Spain. There's actually one in California. So there's a few programs that have a great reputation for learning how to taste, because just like wine, there can be defects, and they're not necessarily obvious, and a lot of times people taste them and think that's how olive oil is supposed to taste, but they're actually bad. So I wanted to make sure, if I'm going to make this premium olive oil, that it actually is up to scratch and I can identify what I'm looking for.
And just a side question before we get back to the supply chain, if I was to do a randomized olive oil taste test now on the table, would you be able to pick out that was grown in your views properly or under the right conditions?
I can definitely, well, I do blind taste test myself. Sometimes my husband will put my little tasting cups and he'll put a sticker under one so I properly vote without any idea which one is which. So I can definitely pick out a defect, especially the common defects. And I can tell this one is bad, this one is good. Why is this bad? I can often tell if it's an early harvest, a later harvest. I can often tell the variety or have a hint of the varieties used.
How would you describe the flavor profile of, good olive oil versus, I guess, supermarket olive oil? Is it possible to describe?
Well, certainly, in the sense that the number one thing just like wine, there's a lot of different aromas and tastes that you can have with olives. There's thousands, different varieties of olives. So and they come from different places, and, when they're harvested, it can affect the flavor, have a different profile to it. However, in general, extra virgin olive oil should smell like plants, and it should smell alive. So whenever you smell an extra virgin olive oil, especially if you've spent any good money on it, but if you've picked it up at the supermarket, you should also do this, because to be extra virgin, it should have a smell that reflects something that's not just like a dead pantry fat, like something that's waxy or buttery. It should actually smell like often fresh cut grass or herbs or tomatoes, or there's some common notes. But when I tell people, because there's so many different things you can smell, sometimes it's fruity, sometimes it's more herbal. It's like, do you smell life? And if you smell life, we're on to the right way. Because if you don't, and you're just smelling like a wax, kind of flatness, it's probably already gone rancid. And in which case, we're no longer talking about extra virgin olive oil.
Wow, it's incredible. Back to the supply chain. So you've, you identified, like you say, that's been the case in many other commoditized products, I guess, from milk to cocoa, chocolate, whatever. Was there any, when you identified the problem and you're thinking, what should I do about this, or what's the opportunity with the citizens of soil? I'd love to know how you thought about the solution, but also whether there were any other industries where there was anything that stood up as an inspiration of actually they've done something about this that you could learn from.
Totally. I mean, I really took a lot of inspiration from, well, I mentioned coffee, but the other industries that I felt like had their craft movement. So be it coffee, be it chocolate, awareness around different varieties, different beans, different production, fair, just ethical is something really inspiring to take from those categories. But also on the, not getting the ethics side, also just on the quality perspective, what, craft beer and the craft spirits movement have gone through to educate, how many gins were in this country 20 years ago. And now it's like, well, now maybe we're over the gin boom. There are so many popping up constantly and all these incredible different botanicals and ways that people were serving them. So I really was inspired by that, as well as wine. And that's just because olives and grapes are inherently related. They come from the same places. They grow in the same parallels in the world, the same climates, often by the same people, going back, generation, since the start of all of this. So it follows on from the wine. So there's so many similarities when we talk about different varieties, profiles, how you use it with food, how different olive oils pair differently, just like different wines. There's a bit of a distinction when we go into aging, and obviously wine production, you have so much more control as the winemaker. And as in olive oil, it's really an act of nature because it's a fresh fruit juice. There's not a lot of manipulation you can do from that moment of milling. It's done, and all you have is what nature has given you that year to represent. So, but I was certainly inspired by how can you make something? Think of what people now pay for coffee. Think of what they're willing to pay for a bar of chocolate. It's sat there on the shelf next to one that doesn't have the same credentials. And why are they reaching for that? And that's what I think we should do in this space.
Yeah. So tell me what you did.
Well, what we're doing, I'd say, not necessarily what we've been able to totally achieve yet, but from the get-go, also coming from the sustainability background because I started this business as a side hustle. I was still working full-time in sustainability, for a while, maybe the first 2 years. So traceability and transparency are still of utmost importance to me, particularly the transparency, because it shows that traceability. So if you can just be open about everything. So to me, disclosing things that most olive oil brands don't talk about, which is when you were harvested. So most brands, the legal requirement is to have a best before date. Best before only represents when it was bottled, which can be a year or longer from when it was harvested. Doesn't represent the freshness. Putting a harvest date and communicating this was made on this day shows instantly the flavor and nutrition to expect, and that's already setting a quality. Things like giving specificity of region, which a lot more producers do now, narrowing it down, not just like of EU origin, and really highlighting the varieties, because like we're talking about with wine, just saying that this is an olive oil from Italy doesn't really give you an indicator of what it's actually going to taste like. And of course, you don't know the varieties right now, but we can start to educate shoppers on if you see Arbequina, you can expect something more delicate. And if you like the more delicate oil, you can get this. If you see something that says Coratina, it's going to be bitter and super peppery. And you can start to bring people on that journey, just like with 70% cacao, just like giving them those cues. So to me, it was like, how transparent can we be? And then even from a perspective of, a lot of people use extra virgin olive oil from the very beginning, which this was never something we thought about. I knew it was healthy, of course, which is why, we always used it as a family, but I didn't realize people's obsessive interest in it from a health perspective until I first started sampling at Selfridges, and people would come up and say, my doctor has told me that I need to switch to extra virgin olive oil. Is this healthy? And we had always, from the very beginning, disclosed the total polyphenols and had our lab reports from a health perspective and that total polyphenols on our website, which has increasingly become more popular as coming out of the pandemic, as more people are switching into health, as I'd say a trend, but also getting more into health for like a lifestyle perspective. And so having that there, I think, has really set us apart. And also, I know it's made an impact on the industry because other olive brands who have been around decades longer than us on the shelf have told us that they have used that as a model and started to want to disclose, because we're telling everyone, look for a harvest date, look for these key indicators of quality. And it's making other olive brands, which I think is, if anything else, it's a huge step forward in the industry.
I think it's so good because we obviously we're a podcast about luxury, but we're not talking about luxury in the kind of old sense of the understanding of it. And I think craft, provenance, the whole of what you're doing, I guess, is part of that, a reaction against food industrialization, which went on for years and years and years. And I think everyone is seeing through, obviously, ultra processed food, but other things around pesticides, how bad that is for us. But also just a real interest in craft, provenance, the slow food movement, all of that. And I just don't think any of us listening to you, or many of us, would never have thought about wine and olive oil being in the same sort of interest league in terms of how different it can be, the flavors, the tones, whatever, the health benefits.
Yeah.
But of course, wine is well understood for that and has sort of niches everywhere, niches within niches of people who know everything about it.
Yeah, to me, getting into the world of olive oil felt like getting into the world of wine whenever I first got my first wine books and did, my first tasting classes there. Only somehow almost more romantic and more like spiritual. Olive oil has this beautiful intrinsic connection to all of the major Western religions, from Islam to Judaism to Christianity. It has a role, the olive leaf going back to the first Olympians. Like there's this whole connection through Western culture with, from the Middle East on since antiquity, with this connection back to something that it's hard to find something that is, of course, wine makes you joyful. And I love wine. There's so many lovely things about it, but it's hard to find something that is this indulgent and this healthy. Yeah. I can't think of another food item that gives you both of those things, like something as sexy as like a extra virgin olive oil fat.
So you're almost disintermediating the supply chain, the middle of the supply chain, or the distributor, the traditional way. You've got to find these people. You started with your friends and your great friends in Crete. How do you select or get other people on board? What's the process for doing that? What do they need to show you to be able to sell through Citizens of Soil? And then, of course, where do you sell?
Yeah, so starting off with our friends was great, but they are very small batch producers. So we sold out quite quickly that first year. And I thought, okay, well, I feel like there's more people like this that have the same issue, that are making something to really good quality, but they're not running an international export. Maybe they're not great marketers, which is not their job as incredible farmers. So can I find other people like this? So the next spot I went to was Portugal. I am fortunate enough to be in some olive oil groups through my school is one, like kind of connecting to other farmers, as well as I'm in this incredible group for women in olive oil globally. And we have several thousand members around the world of women that work at all levels in agriculture. So I kind of started to network through these communities and find the stars, people who fit this checklist that I had for regenerative agriculture, high quality olive oil. Like, before you even send me a sample, send me your lab results, kind of going and screening people before I got there. And then I could drop into a country and go visit a couple different producers who I had pre-screened and scouted out. But we would also on that sometimes just be driving. I remember touching down in Croatia and being like, going into another olive oil place, like, are there any women farming? And they're like, in this whole region. And they're like, I think there's 2. Yeah. And so then you go see. So
find them,
yeah, going and finding these people, and often women, as my husband said, was like a shortcut to finding good quality because they were so rare already in their region and they were already having to stand out so much. So yeah, we started finding people like them and sourcing directly from them and bringing their oil over, but making sure that they were always a part of that story. So even when we are selling into retail, it's their name on the bottle. We're putting their information. Some of our producers, it's even a more kind of collaborative process with stories, or if they get in a workshop or going out there at harvest and getting all the marketing content with them.
Yeah. And is it exclusively women growers?
No. So it's at least 50% female owned and female led groves. So we definitely look to champion and showcase women in the supply chain in leadership positions. So not just sometimes like, oh, my sister, she works over here carve. And I'm like, okay, this isn't tokenism that I'm just looking for a tick mark. So we have some incredible female millers in the group, and certainly family groves that the women are involved in making, decisions on it. Yeah, we certainly, when we find women, they often prioritize sustainability and nutrition in a way that it's not always as common in their region. And so that's why my husband's like, it's a shortcut to quality.
Yes, yeah. And selling anything in a marketplace is a challenge. Can you talk about the journey of who you started selling to and who you're selling to now, and how you do it, obviously?
We always wanted to be a D2C business. I just personally, as a shopper, was often buying D2C for those sorts of, home brands, skincare brands, lifestyle things. I was already kind of switching into D2C. So I was really inspired by what I was seeing actually in the beauty space and like the luxury beauty space with how do you make something as intimate as like your makeup and the skincare that you're putting on? How are you convincing people to buy that online? I know they say perfume is like the last luxury good to get people to buy online. But the reality is there's brands like Fern who have just done extremely well getting this like cult subscriber unit moving. So I was really interested from that perspective of how can we do what some of these luxury, beauty brands are doing in the clean beauty space and getting people excited. That started off D2C, but it was the pandemic. Soon after we had decided to launch the business. So a lot of which D2C actually played really well during the pandemic, but there were some great shops, friends that had bars and restaurants and things that I had to kind of convert into storefronts. Do you remember that crazy phase at the beginning of the pandemic? Like one of the best bars in the world suddenly turns into like a bottle shop and they're like selling things. So we actually started with a few of those, some great places like Top Cuvée, Shop Cuvée. They converted to Shop Cuvée, which now I think is even larger wine company for them. So there were some places like that. And then that got us on the radar, I believe, of Selfridges. So our first year, we got on the radar, got in touch with Selfridges and launched in Selfridges at the end of our first year.
Amazing. And that was just getting in touch with them and they said yes pretty quickly, or was that a bit of a job to get in there?
It was a relationship we had through the Drinks buyer. So we were able to get an introduction, but I will say the hardest part is probably getting in front of, for us, the hardest part has always been just getting a buyer, getting the right email address, getting the right contact, finding out who you need to be in front of. Once we get there, it's rare that we don't get it, because I don't want to say that they need us. They don't need us. Of course they don't. But there's, on the sustainability front, on a lot of businesses are looking to add brands that have certain credentials into their range. Selfridges has a great piece on sustainability that they're looking to do. They were really excited about the female-led. You're ticking a box for them.
Right.
Yeah. But also, I know, and they know that the quality is outstanding. So, it's like they look at it, they try the olive oil, and that's really it. Then it might be an issue of like, commercials and margins and that sort of thing. But it's all, the hardest part to me has always just been getting in front of them.
Yeah. And I think your timing's good, because I could be wrong here, but it was always known that extra virgin olive oil was better than olive oil, but it was always maybe seen in a sort of category that was oil's not great for you. Whereas now there is real evidence, isn't there, about the health benefits of olive oil, full stop.
Overwhelming.
Can you talk about that? Because it's amazing.
I think one of the bigger problems in the industry is the fact that extra virgin olive oil is lumped into a category with olive oil, regular olive oil, and extra virgin is a completely different product and made a different way. So the research gets really blurry with consumers, because is it all, and even in this conversation, we often use olive oil as an abbreviation for, I'm only ever talking about extra virgin olive oil when I'm talking about something that's good for you. So I think there was a lot of cloudy issues with the reports and things that happened. But the reality is it has been a superfood since like ancient Greece. Like, it's been well documented for all sorts of ailments that people have used for, centuries, extra virgin olive oil or virgin olive oil. So it's only been, I guess, in the past couple of decades that more and more research has been done specifically. And I think really diving into, probably led a lot by the gut health movement and dementia. There's things like that I was at a health conference in Greece for Yale University in the States. They did their annual health symposium on olive oil in Crete this year, and I was there. And there's just a mountain of evidence around particularly things like dementia that they've been researching for decades now. There's been so many reports around the world, so they can see the correlation and this connection between extra virgin olive oil as something that helps prevent and actually fight a lot of the symptoms of dementia. And there's just so much evidence because so many different people have been researching over this time. So there's that. And now the gut health bit is a bit newer, but there's been enough research done, especially since the late 90s when the whole Mediterranean diet kind of started to come into its own. And as a result, we have a lot of material to work with.
How do you promote to other growers what you're up to and try and get them into your circle, or encourage people to know about you, and encourage the farming practices and the growing practices that you've talked about?
Yeah, the farmer program is actually, we were just in Barcelona last week with one of our investors who's in the impact space, and she literally does these farmer programs, and she's done it for luxury groups before. And so how do you kind of, bring up quality and the livelihoods and the credentials of,
Because there's a fine line to tread, I guess, between being sort of patronizing and a bit noblesse oblige and being helpful and encouraging. I suppose there's that going
and we're
on.
not farmers. So like, we're not even coming at it like, oh, look what's worked on our groves. It's a really delicate. What we've been able to do though is, because I started with some really impressive farmers who were already well on that way. I think my second farmer ever, she's still one that I kind of look to as this is the dream case of a producer. Not only is she a fantastic farmer, she's an incredible miller. This beautiful regenerative grove, so thoughtful, building, insect hotels around the property and really supporting biodiversity. And what she's doing there is kind of the role. So the best thing I thought from the beginning was, if I just connect them, we don't tell them anything. We might provide them some resources. Maybe we recommend, oh, here's this course. I just sent them something from some regenerative wine producers on composting. Here's these things that we'll send you, but y'all speak to each other, because you all know, each of you have a bit of this and you're already doing best practices. And the ones that are a little lagging behind get exposure to that. So they're all in a WhatsApp group together, our producers. And we also have a quarterly call where we kind of vote and select a specific topic related to regenerative that we work on together. So be it insect repellent whenever, we're not using traditional sprays, or actually, we also had one on just like harvest anxiety coming up on harvest, and how do you deal with that? So connecting them. And this year we're actually having our first trip where we're bringing them all together in Portugal for a 2-day workshop, learning together, facilitating. But again, it's a lot of what they know and facilitating different experts with amongst them to share best practices.
Amazing. And where, at the moment, where predominantly are your sales in terms of countries or regions, and where do you hope to expand to?
So we're only in the UK. Our business is about 70% D2C. So basically, it's about a third retail. A third of our olive oil club, which is the fastest and strongest part of our business, fastest growing for sure.
How does that work?
That's like a subscription. So you sign up, and every month or 2 months at your frequency, you get a different olive oil from a different producer.
So like a wine club?
Like a wine club, like a coffee club, and you get a little information about them and a recipe, and you get their photo, and you can kind of learn a bit about them, but also the oil, and experience different styles. And that is a really growing interest, for anyone. It's also the best value. I really purposely try to make it a better value option, although we're looking at even a premium option of that, because as I was saying, that some oils are just absolutely outstanding, and you want to kind of tier for the people who want to really go on that olive oil journey. And then a third is just people just buying from the website, one-off orders, one-off bottles. But yeah, from a retail perspective, we launched in Waitrose just over a year, almost 2 years ago, with our bottle and our refill pouch, which was a first in the category, to have a refill in this pouch format on shelf. And now we're in, of course, at the beginning, we're in Selfridges and Fortnum's, and these beautiful independent shops and things like Sous Chef, and really great kind of foodie but luxury stockist, and independents. And now also Ocado, Able and Cole, Mindful Chef, so some more aligned kind of food kit, food box services.
Where they presumably shrink it down into a small package.
Mindful Chef actually, and Able and Cole, you can just add it to your order. So if you're already getting a box of fruit and veg, or you're already getting a meal kit for the week,
right,
you can just add a bottle of olive oil.
And it's interesting in terms of the demographics or the consumers, is that I'd assume that in sort of, the Mediterranean, you don't need to sell there because they kind of probably buy locally anyway, or more likely to.
It is funny. We get a lot of requests from Europe and even the Med. I remember getting early on a luxury boutique hotel group in Spain was like, we'd love to showcase your bottles in our, at our hotel. So I was like, oh God, I can point you to several wonderful Spanish producers. There is something to the aesthetic of the brand though, because we do sometimes have people that even when I give them the website of my producer and I'm like, here, buy directly from them. You're in Germany. And they're like, oh, but I want the offering that how we've packaged it, or, they want something beautiful in that design. But yeah, there's certainly, I'm American, you can hear it in the accent. So is my partner. We get a lot of interest from America.
Is that on the radar?
that is on the radar.
Yeah.
It's fairly easy. We've already been able to set up a business quite straightforward as Americans. I always say, I think for a lot of brands, America's the prize. It's the big, massive consumer market with loads of money. Despite whatever might be going on now, it is something that we are interested in testing because about 50% of our website traffic already comes from there, with us doing nothing but trying to fight it off.
Yes, so you'd be mad. But do you deliver to America at the moment?
We don't even deliver to them right now.
Are you tariffed or not?
We'll find out, won't we?
Yeah. I think what's also, when you talk about the brand, it is a gorgeous brand. What would you say your brand stands for? And I guess to that, do you think it might apply one day to other products that aren't related to olive oil? Or do you think you'll always be in that swim lane?
I think our brand, what it stands for, is an interesting one, because I've kind of got myself in a mess by wanting all of these pillars underneath it, caring about the, regenerative side, wanting to do this circular packaging, wanting to work with small producers, wanting to champion women. So we almost have every person that comes to work for us, or even, marketing consultants, are always like, you're a brand that has too much to share. There's too many things. And then that doesn't even factor in quality, which we're very proud of, because we never, I meet great producers all the time that I would love to support them because they are so great on the farming side and they're really standouts in their community. The oil doesn't make the grade for me. It's not the quality that I need. So I think if you stripped everything back, though, I do think the quality side is actually that, and a bit of what backs up the quality, which is wanting to work with small scale producers, not wanting this industrial mass produced product, is really, so the quality is there because it's coming from these lovely artisans.
And are you behind the aesthetic of the brand?
Yeah, I mean, my background is in marketing. It's funny, the brand is only luxury, as we'd say, from the look, or, it sits in the premium space, because from the very beginning, I knew the price we were going to pay the farmers. So then, putting my cogs together, realizing how expensive the oil, or the price that the oil would be at the beginning. And I thought, I need to make this look to justify the higher price point. Certainly it's not the most expensive olive oil on the shelf at all, but it's like, where it's going to sit, it needs to look and feel premium to justify that price. So making it feel that way from the very beginning, even though probably before we actually started doing the pricing, I thought, I'd have this a bit more fun of a brand. I was kind of going for a different angle, something more accessible. But then the price point just didn't work, because when you're paying 3 times the commodity price, or you're paying this premium for the product because it's better quality, well, the price is going to be higher. So suddenly I couldn't go in with this brand that actually looked artisan. I couldn't go in with a brand that looked like a humble farmers on the cover. They put the little, always these like peasant farmers in Italy on the cover.
Bucolic scenes of yesteryear.
As if it's been made by the producer, and I couldn't do that. I needed it to look something a bit sharp, like I was looking at natural wines and thinking they're telling a similar story.
No, it's great. It's a brilliant brand.
Yeah, thank you.
A few other questions, just zooming a little bit out. What are your other favorite luxuries, just in general?
Favorite luxuries? Well, I'm really into food and drink. So when I think of where my income goes every month and what I spend, I'm not the sort of person that's buying designer handbags. And also from my sustainability, working in that for years, I really don't like to buy things unless they serve a purpose. I don't like to buy if I don't need 5 nice winter coats. I just need one. I don't like to over consume at all. I'm really aware of that shopping footprint. But I feel like, to me, food and drink is a great way to kind of express yourself and do that without, over consuming, because you will eat it. You are going to drink it. These are things that serve a purpose. It's not just another nice perfume or something. So I do, food and drink is really where I spend a lot of my money. And when I go on holiday, I always want to go to even just a regular grocery store, but the little artisan independent shops. And I love buying thoughtful, nice food and drink is definitely my thing.
And other brands that have inspired you on your journey or inspire you now?
I mean, saying that, I'm actually not really inspired by that many food and drink businesses from a brand perspective.
That's interesting.
Yeah, even though I do I do like them because I am the first to buy, like, does this look like it was made in someone's garage? This is what I'll be attracted to. It's really interesting.
So your farmer's market kind
Yeah,
of,
yeah,
you're perfect.
yeah. No, I still like some slick brands, but I often sometimes think they're over processed and I don't really like some of those. But actually from the business perspective, I probably take most of my inspiration from the beauty category or even fashion, things like, for the office today, we were just talking about, and I don't know because I always say things the Spanish way, vejas, the shoes. I think they're Portuguese. They might say veja, but I say veja because it's Spanish. But their take back program and how you can bring like any shoe in and they like repair it, like things like that, that some of these incredible luxury, more premium fashion brands are tacking on to their service, like forever repairs, which I think the fashion industry has to do. Selfridges having their like resell shop, these sort of things that they need to like. I'm like, it's shameful if you don't offer these at this point. And that I find really exciting. And it does help justify then when you are purchasing from those brands, even if you don't necessarily need another pair of shoes, but you're kind of on board with, okay, well, at least they're doing a lot of good. Yeah, I'm really, inspired by those sorts of things. There's a lot happening in skincare that's really cool to see.
What, in terms of subscriptions, provenance, and
subscription models, collaborations that they're doing, things like Heckles, which now has a new brand. I forgot their new name. They've just rebranded, but they're using, waste coffee scrubs and packaging that kind of fully breaks down. Like all those sorts of things are really exciting. The only thing is that in food, actually, I look at them for a lot of inspiration. Like, okay, this packaging fully breaks down. This is amazing. In food, you have to be very careful because it needs to preserve the quality. Extra virgin olive oil is super temperamental as an ingredient. It can leach certain things. It can't have heat. It can't have air. It can't have light, like whenever it's being packaged. So to preserve, all the flavor. So we unfortunately can't use non-virgin materials. Everything has to be like if we're using virgin plastic or whatever, everything has to be not as sustainable in that way. But I often look to those other categories for inspiration and see how we could maybe do something like that.
Yeah, brilliant. I have to ask, where is the most beautiful olive grove you've ever seen? Where is it?
I thought you were going to ask like the most beautiful olive oil, which I'm always like, I could never pick a favorite. The most beautiful olive grove, this is very biased, but our family who we started this with, and they have a couple groves, but there's one, we call it Stavros because it's like at this cross in Crete. It is the background of my computer screen. If you're ever on a Zoom call with me or a call with me, it's the background. And it's actually just so beautiful. It's that rolling hillside and it's the beauty of an area that is not monocrop like you often see in, other parts of Crete, but certainly the south of Spain. When I go there and you drive for miles and miles and all you see is olive trees. This beautiful part of Crete, it's the wine region, it's peppered, it's just that patchwork of different things growing. So it just looks so alive. And it also looks that this is a thriving community versus something that's completely been emptied out because it's just for one industrial grove. And it's my happy place. You can set down your phone on the ground there and you just hear all this life in the fields.
Wonderful. And is there a country you would like to find a farmer or grower in that you've yet to get on board?
Oh, I mean, God, anywhere that makes olive oil, I'm always... let's see. Well, South Africa was a really big one for me that I had wanted to try a Southern Hemisphere, and we just launched that in December. So we get the off harvest. So going to the Southern Hemisphere, because there's one harvest year in olive oil, so just like wine. So going to the Southern Hemisphere means that it gets us a fresh oil halfway through the year when the other Mediterranean oils start to mellow. So that was a big tick.
Amazing. You'd never think South Africa and olive oil.
Yeah, right. But the Portuguese, it's Italian varieties planted by the Portuguese. So there's always, it's such a mix, the culture there. And I'm keen to get one. I'd like to kind of find one from the Middle East. They have some interesting, beautiful varieties, and it's such a culture that's based around olive oil as well. And so I like to kind of represent, everyone has their own varieties and their own profile and how they like it. And it'd be nice to get something for those people from that place that they actually, really appreciate and like. And Latin America is actually a really exciting one because the Spanish actually planted, when they brought their missionaries as they were, conquering South America, they planted olive trees because it's such a part of their religious ceremonies. And so that and wine they really brought. So there's ancient trees, or ancient we call them, but they're hundreds of years old, beautiful trail in Latin America. And there are some outstanding oils that come out of there. Crazy. Some of the best I've tried are like Brazil and Peru, which you would never think of for olive oil. They seem too, Amazonian to have that sort of, but no, there's some beautiful oils that come out of there that I'm really keen to maybe see if we can do something with.
Yeah. Well, that was an amazing, what you people didn't know about olive oil, they'll now know, but more importantly about taking on, an industry that the specific industry that was commoditized, probably, well, obviously still is, but you're doing something to change it, and encourage consumer perceptions of what good looks like from a growing perspective. But we always ask the same 4 questions at the end of our podcasts. So if I may, I'm going to crack on. First, what would you most like to change about your industry? And I think we can probably talk about the food industry in general.
Well, God, I can be as specific as the olive oil industry because the one thing that I think really messes up the industry, which I spoke on a minute earlier, is the fact that olive oil and extra virgin olive oil, this category, that everything is put together, is all jumbled up. But the reality is these products, regular olive oil is like orange soda, and extra virgin olive oil is like fresh pressed orange juice. And the difference in nutrition and flavor and use is, night and day. So the fact that they're on the shelf together and extra virgin olive oil sits with all these flat edible fats means that people don't understand that it is like a fresh juice and it needs to be consumed early, and the most nutrition and the most flavor is going to come from, the freshness of it. I think that really messes up the industry, and the fact that it's a lot of it is because it's dominated by these global entrenched brands who make most of their money from the wider cooking oils, edible oils, cooking fats category, that they almost purposely make it a bit opaque and dubious as to what is what, and using words like pure and light and everything to totally mislead the shopper to not understand what they're actually getting. Even though extra virgin olive oil itself is one of the most regulated foods, it's done that because it sits in this category of things that people have always tried to mislead. So I don't know how that is fixed, but education is the only way I know how. But I wish there was another word or a way to separate those categories properly.
Well, that's sounds like that's your mission. So
That should be my, yeah.
What most concerns you about the world we're leaving the next generation?
Oh gosh, well,
That's a big question, but
big question. I suppose just from personal awareness, the past 6 months or so, probably the internet and how to really, what people are finding as their facts and their research and what their access to through social media. I think social media can be a really incredible thing because it can, it's how I meet a lot of my producers, and it can connect you to beautiful arts and beautiful brands and things that you really like. But I think how it's being led and how it's been created and all that is dangerous. So I think that if you would have asked maybe a couple of years ago, I'd be like, oh, the planet, I'm so worried about this, working with farmers whose groves burn, and there's all sorts of plagues that happen, and there's floods. It's literally fires, floods, bugs. They get all the plagues that happen at these groves and at the agricultural level. I would have said that, but actually the past 6 months I'm thinking, maybe it'll just be we'll all divide so much before that even happens. So that's probably the scary bit about the future.
I love this question. If you had to give up your job tomorrow, you couldn't do this, what would you do?
Oh, okay. So I didn't know I couldn't do this because I would absolutely just do this. It's, you find a job that you would do for free, and then whenever you actually get paid. As a founder, you're not getting paid at the beginning. And so doing something that you just absolutely love, and at some point getting, that first paycheck is incredible. I think I would definitely still do something related to olive oil. So I would still be leading some sort of agricultural group to help farmers. I was just in Madrid doing a talk, but trying to do this, progressing some women in the olive oil space, not just my brand, like the wider community. Maybe just be a small batch olive oil producer.
Yeah, it sounds like you might retire one day to some grove somewhere in Crete.
Yeah, no, you know what? Actually, I would never do that from an income perspective. I would do that for an enjoyment perspective. But farming as a livelihood, we cannot pay these people enough. It is a very stressful, intense, physically, emotionally, and you're contingent on nature and things that are outside of your control with the climate. So I think farmers have one of the hardest jobs in the world. And so I wouldn't want to have to rely on my income from that. But something in the olive oil space for sure.
Yeah. And our last question is, what is the most exciting thing for you in the next 5 years?
I think going into the US market is a really exciting opportunity for the business. It's a much more progressed market. I mean, it's probably like this across everything in luxury, but certainly in food and drink, they tend to lead the trends a few years in advance. And there's some really beautiful and incredible and just powerhouse olive oil brands already in the US. And it's kind of fun to, people see that as competition, of course, naturally. But I do think when you can lift up a whole category, like we've seen in coffee and gin and craft spirits and craft beer, like if you can lift up a whole category and engage like your tribe, your crew within there, that's quite exciting. Yeah. Or, that olive farm that I'll get someday in the next 5 years.
Sarah, thank you so much for your time today and for speaking so eloquently on the subject. It's really appreciated.
No, thank you so much for having me in this beautiful studio.
Thanks so much for listening. This has been What the Luxe. You can find us on socials at @Reform and drop us any questions or comments on Twitter using the hashtag #WhatTheLuxe. Or if you're a luxury brand looking for strategy and design that goes beyond the banal, get in touch via hello@matchreform.com and chat to one of our consultants.